Good afternoon. Welcome back to Direct Talk. I'm your host, David G, here in Freeport, Grand Bahama. In my family shout-out, I made a mistake. I did not call my Aunt Marie name, who grew up with us. She lived with us after my father died. Impacted my life greatly. I remember driving her blue Dodge Demon. She had a brand new car. When you turn 15 and 16, Danny, you feel as if you could drive, man. You used to go steal the car out the yard. And while she didn't have any children, she practically grew up all of her sisters and brothers' children. She's still in the yard in Hebron Town. She's the only sister alive now, and my uncle Junior Gray is the only brother, Uncle Jay. Yeah, Atwell Gray Jr. Uncle Haki and Uncle Witt and Uncle Howe is going to be with the Lord, and I Shirley, my mummy, Zeta, and Marcelita. And today also is Leslie's birthday. I don't know how old Les is. That's the Witty Gray oldest child. The only man who sleep twitching too. And I got to send a birthday shout out to Alice Gator. I don't know if you remember Alice Gator. They used to live in 8 Mile Rock. She now lives in Seagrape. Yes. My first girlfriend was her sister Carolyn, who died. I couldn't be no more than 12 or 13 years old. I talking about I like Carolyn. Didn't know what like was. But they were the days growing up in 8 Mile Rock. And then I got to send a special shout out to Lady Gray in Long Island, who's always listening in. If you're interested in being a sponsor on the show, contact the sales department, 502-3902. You can talk to them about a gold, silver, bronze, or copper sponsorship. If you're enjoying the show and you would like for it to continue, I'm appealing for sponsors for the show. We're now going to talk about the community of Hawksbill. The first, I believe, subdivision in Grand Bahama. 200 homes, I am told, was built. We're going to talk about who were the builders of these homes. Who was the person who oversaw the construction? Who were the families? Some of the first families who moved into these homes. It was an upgrade. Many of us were used to the outside toilet and the hand pump. They are now moving into a place where they got running water and they got inside toilet, and they don't have to go to the kitchen no more. They could have the stove inside the house. Joining me for the second segment is one of Hawksbill's finest sons. Grew up, moved into 25 Hawksbill Drive. The family is still there today. Coming to Grand Bahama at the age of 4, Mr. Harold Williams. Good afternoon. Welcome to Direct Talk.
Good afternoon, David. Thank you for having me.
Tell me, you all started out in a place called West Side Village. Tell me, where is this West Side Village? What was West Side Village? I've never heard about it.
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you for inviting me to the show. I was in Nassau at the opening of Parliament and was not scheduled to come back until this afternoon. But when you told me that, you couldn't push the show back, yes. And I had to cut my trip short to make sure that I'm here, because if they're going to have any kind of discussion about Hawksbill, I'd like to be included.
Yeah, amen.
Yes, but, you talk about Hawksbill being one of the first community in Hawksbill, but pre-Hawksbill was a town called Westside Village. Westside Village, well, most people on Grand Mama probably don't know, but Westside Village was located right on the property by the F&M headquarters and the Public Service Union. That whole property was houses that were built, like Danny told you, for persons who were workers of the Grand Bahama Port Authority. They were clap-out houses.
In Freeport?
In Freeport. All right, those houses were clap-out houses. And from my back door, I could have seen Winn-Dixie.
Okay.
Pantry Pride food store, you could have seen all of those stores there. Boss Bird, that became Scorpio's restaurant, was located right next door. Okay, and in front of Westside Village was nothing but bush. So the area where portion control was in the back of town, that was nothing but bush. And so I recall as a young man, still, probably in grade 1 or grade 2, my father came home. He was a taxi driver back then, and he came home with this brochure of a brand new house. The house was located in Hawksbill. The cost of the house then was $10,000.
Say what?
$10,000. Brand new house. Like you talk about, we had indoor toilets. You had the kitchen, and so you didn't have to worry about going outside and being afraid about going into the outhouses like we did when we lived in 8 Mile Rock and Westside Village.
So Westside Village had outside toilets as well?
Westside Village had toilets on the inside.
Okay.
All right, but it was not as elaborate as the new houses that we had in Hawksbill.
Okay.
Okay. And, Hawksbill was one of those community that you can say was a model community for the entire Bahamas.
Yes.
Hawksbill, when you lived in Hawksbill, you really didn't have to go anywhere.
Okay.
Okay, because everything was right there for you. We had primary school, high school. We had churches, we had gas stations, we had a furniture store, we had a barber shop, we had restaurants. Everything was in Hawksbill.
That's right, because you had a place that burned down. Danny, you had a shopping complex. What was it called?
Absolutely, Harold, as you remember.
We just knew it as Hawksbill Shopping Center.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I remember Uncle Willie's shoe store was there.
Yes. Uncle Willie had his shoe store. John Roll. Yeah.
A furniture store.
Yeah, and in fact, Harold, if you remember, LMR Drugs started.
Yes.
LMR Drugs started in Hawksbill.
That's right.
That's where the franchise started in Hawksbill. And so Harold is absolutely right. Hawksbill was a self-contained community, and in fact we had people from all over the world living there. Canadians, I remember Canadians, people.
Are you serious?
White Bahamians, Jamaicans, people of a diverse community. Hawksbill was, and I say it was a model community in that, it was just after just before majority rule came in to be, and so it was before the Yellow Elder communities in Nassau and all so it was a model, I would say, for
it certainly was. Certainly was.
Who would have built this community, and where would have those homes from this place called Westside Village go to?
Well, Danny's
a
little older than me, so he would probably remember.
He looking at me like he don't know. He was talking about it during the break.
Yeah, well, the homes were actually sold off. The wooden homes, the Port Authority sold the homes off to the late Floyd Russell. Some of them were carted down in Pindus Point, and a person bought some, and some was carted down to 8 Mile Rock, just by Butler, call it Butler Corner.
Okay.
Yeah, and so they were carted away, similar to how they moved the homes from Pine Ridge on Low Boys and took them away. But during that time, in late 60s, late 60s, Hawksbill came to be, and it came to be a model community. Some of the families.
Before you go to the families, who would have constructed these homes? Anybody have any idea?
The Port Authority.
Okay.
They were built Port Authority, but there were Bahamians. I think the Bahamian superintendent, as it were, was the late Cecil Hepburn.
The blimp.
Cecil Hepburn was he was the project manager, as it were, because he hired and fired. He was the person who oversaw the project. But the Port Authority was the driving force behind Hawksbill, the community.
And Harold, you're telling me the homes were $10,000 for the home, and how much was your monthly payment?
$150 a month was the monthly payment.
You gotta talk loud, man.
$150 per month was the mortgage.
And who did the mortgage with you, Danny, you remember?
Well, there was a company called Roy West. Roy West was the financial institution, and as I remember, I believe Pastor Anthony Grant from Agape House, he worked with that institution at the time, and I stand to be corrected on that. But as I remember, my brother-in-law making these monthly payments, and they had a little receipt book, and you make sure every month you make your payments.
And this would have been which year would have the community have started?
The community, we moved in Hawksbill in December. In fact, it was like a Christmas present, December 1966. So Hawksbill officially opened I remember some of the families like the Jervises, the Pratts. Pratts.
When you say the Pratts, which Pratt you talking about?
Delcina and Sam Pratt.
Yes.
Okay. The Jervises. Who were some of the Jervises? If y'all can remember their names.
Herbert Jervis was the father.
Yes.
Herbert Jervis. Jeffrey Jervis. Eleanor Jervis.
Yes. Stella. Lionel. Cassine.
Right.
They grew up in Hawksbill?
All of them grew up.
Yeah. All of them grew up in Hawksbill. Hawksbill. I wanted to say that Hawksbill, the community of Hawksbill produced some fine citizens that we can all be proud of today, and they're persons who are making positive contribution to the community and to the country that grew up in Hawksbill. Yeah.
Also, let me just say to you, David, a lot of persons don't know that we had many famous persons that came through Hawksbill, okay, and many persons who are considered icon in the country also lived in Hawksbill. The sister of the first Governor General lived in Hawksbill, okay,
Who's
Sister
that?
Butler.
Yeah.
Sister Butler had an orphanage in Hawksbill. She had a convenience store in Hawksbill. I can specifically recall every Christmas Eve around 12 midnight, Sister Butler would bring her children around and they would sing Christmas carol pretty much the whole night through.
To all the residents.
Yes, and you would be in bed and you would just listen to these children just serenade you with the Christmas carol, and it felt like Christmas. And so Sister Butler was one of those persons everybody in Hawksbill knew.
Who were some of the other families who live and some of the things you all did in Hawksbill?
You remember Mama Lou?
Mama Lou, Sister Lucille.
Lucille.
Sister Lucille.
Lucille Adderley.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, she was in fact, Mama Lou, as she was called, in her earlier years, she was an entertainer.
Church of God of Prophecy?
Church of God of Prophecy, definitely. In her latter years, she made quite a lot of positive contribution to the community of Hawksbill. Just similar to the story of Sister Butler. Mama Lou, everyone called her Mama Lou. Mama Lou made a definite positive contribution to many lives right there in the community of Hawksbill. Yeah.
Talk about the fact that Mama Lou was actually an international entertainer, and I would never forget this story. We were just probably 10 or 12 years old at the time, and I recall Sanford Red Fox came to Hawksbill. All right, and we didn't know at the time that he was there, but he stayed at Mama Lou's house. And somehow somebody told the story that Sanford, they called him Sanford, it wasn't Red Fox then, Sanford was at Mama Lou's house. And so all of us as kids, we gathered at the fence and we started shouting for him to come out. We started calling him, Sanford, please come out, please come out. Half an hour later, okay, this big red man, he looked just the way he looked on TV. He came out the house and he was holding a baseball bat and he went to swing at us. And when he saw how much of us was screaming at him, all right, and he held the bat and held his heart like he was having a heart attack and stumbled back. And listen, the scream just went up. It just elevated. Yeah. That was something we would never forget. And I still tell the story anytime I have the opportunity. One of the thing also that people don't know from Grandmom is that we had the first gym in Freeport. Okay, my father had the first gym in Freeport.
In Hawksbill?
In Hawksbill.
That's the weightlifting.
Yes.
When you talk about your father, you get called the name for the listeners out there.
Well, most people back in the day would have called him Shaka Zulu, but his name is Samuel Williams.
Okay.
Samuel Williams is a former Mr. Freeport, former Mr. Grand Mama, former Mr. Luthra.
We got some pictures of them. We can pull up so you can see it.
Yes. And there's two stories I want to tell you with my father and the gym we had in Hawksbill. I remember one day, and I was in primary school. You remember championship wrestling from Florida?
12 o'clock.
Yes.
Live from the Sunshine State.
Who remember Jack Briscoe?
Jack and Jerry. It was a brother.
I was coming from school one day, right? And, I walked into the hallway. And my bathroom door opened. And who should come out the bathroom?
Not Jack Briscoe.
With the red shorts on, okay, and no shirt. And he was going into that gym. Jack Briscoe was in my house. I'll never forget that. I couldn't believe that this man I watch on TV every Saturday was actually in my house. My father never said anything to us. But here it is. This man was coming out of the bathroom because he was, went in the bathroom to dress, and was going into the gym to work out.
Hawksbill.
What you should have had a picture. If you were in
I wish I
America,
did.
they would have made your house a museum to show people that this is where Jack Briscoe once visited. No.
That's right. Jack Briscoe.
In Hawksbill.
In Hawksbill. Championship wrestling from Florida.
They were the days of Terry and Dory Funk.
Yeah. In fact, Jerry Lewis came to Hawksbill School one day, one afternoon. So Hawksbill, yeah.
The
Jerry
infamous-
Lewis, yeah.
Yes.
Jerry Lewis was at
The Greater Latina?
Yes. We were having, I think it's assembly. You call it back then assembly. All right. And Jerry Lewis was the special guest. And he came there, and of course, he was doing all of his skits and what have you. And, the kids we all were laughing. And he was doing this magic trick. I think he was pulling some sort of item out of a bottle. Okay. And I was so close to it, right? I could see the hidden strings that was tied to the thing that he was pulling up. But the kids behind us, they wouldn't be able to see it,
Right.
And so, they, just was amazed with that illusion, But Hawksbill was just a place to grow up.
Who were some of the other families who lived in Hawksbill at the time? I know you talked about the Jervises and you talked about the Williams. Let's talk. The Doheny's would have been there. Who else?
Yes, the Doheny's. In fact, the Doheny's, we were the second family that moved into Hawksbill community, and it's always the Jervis said they were the first. So I
Conceded.
Yeah, we
Okay.
conceded to the Jervises.
Who was the third?
Well, in fact, Calvin Parker, who was our former neighbor in Westside Village, they moved right next door to us in Hawksbill. So they were our former next door neighbor in the community of Westside Village, which Harold would have spoken of and which I might have mentioned. And from there, they continued to be our next door neighbor in Hawksbill. There are so many families that.
You said some of the white people were there. Who were there, Harold?
Perotis, the Sweetings from Abaco, they lived in Hawksbill. Okay. Donnie, in fact, was my neighbor.
Yes.
Our house was right next door.
Yes.
Donnie had married Victoria Heel,
Right.
whose father, was a boat builder. I don't know if you remember.
Yes, of course.
He built the Noah's Ark.
What do you mean if Danny remember? How could Danny forget? That's
I
his
hope he
father.
doesn't forget. But Mr. Heel, in the back of his yard.
In Hawksbill?
In Hawksbill, okay, from the ground up, he built this humongous boat. All right, and back then we just called it Noah's Ark because we was just amazed at how this man on his own built such a big, large boat, and we all wondered, well, you're building this boat, but how are you going to get it from out of the back of the yard? There's no sea and no water nowhere around. How are you going to get this?
Well, that was quite interesting.
Yes, it was.
And and thank you for bringing that story to the table. Thank you for bringing that story to the table, Harold, because my late father-in-law, Fred Heel, he was a heavy-duty operator, equipment. In fact, he helped worked on the road to West End, building the road to West End. When he became at a certain age, and that part of work that was not available to him anymore, he also was a skilled boatman, and so he looked at an opportunity. He said, "Hey, I'm going to build a boat," and that's what he did. He built a boat, and eventually, although as Harold said, you couldn't have seen how he's going to get this boat out, but he got a tractor, he got a bulldozer, and cleared the way out, and then took the boat
on
down.
a crane.
Yes.
Yeah, he put the boat on a flatbed.
Yeah.
Okay, the crane came through on the back road, we called it, which was East Sunrise Highway, and it came through. They cut a track road, and the crane came, lift the boat on the flatbed, and he took it out.
Took it to the fishing hole, and it became a source of income for him for several years. Mm-hmm. He operated the boat on the North Shore, and indeed, to me, that was an example of being versatile and hey, not standing still and making something out of nothing. When we see obstacles, we don't just sit down and die. We take we move on.
That's right.
And he was prepared to do that. That's what he did. Noah's Ark, you call it.
That's right. So we had in Hawksbill, you had so many persons, who had trades, all right, and so you didn't have to come out of Hawksbill if you needed a plumber, all right.
You had a community within a community.
Yes, we did. Bishop Kermit Sanders, his wife Adrienne, her father, Mr. Pratt, was a plumber.
Okay.
Electrician. Yeah.
He was a plumber.
Okay.
He was a plumber.
Okay.
All right. And there was also another plumber there, Mr. Mallory. I don't know if you
Yes,
remember Mr.
absolutely.
Mallory.
Yes, absolutely.
I hope it's in the Mallory who was the lead, who
That's
formed the Cooling Waters.
Mallory.
They tell me there was a
Yes.
Mallory who was a plumber who was very instrumental in the Cooling Waters. But keep going.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so, you had a plumbing problem, and, they would come to your house, all right? They would fix the, whatever
Right
the
there.
issue was, right there and then, okay? And you credit the bill. You pay it later because you didn't have the money, all right? And so, we had these convenient food stores. Even though we had the grocery store, you also had a convenience stores.
In Hawksbill?
In Hawksbill. You used to go to Mama Lou and you used to purchase, cream, sugar.
Mama Lou had a license to operate.
I don't know if they had a
That's all right.
permit then, but
they got it done.
They got
Yeah.
it done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
then sometimes you trust, you trust it
can
in a
always
cream.
credit, yeah.
And you come back and you pay it later.
We can go to our final break. But before we go, Danny, I want to talk a little bit about Tavares Evans. Today is a challenging day for you to be on the show in that your grandson has experienced an accident. Talk a little bit about it and let's make the appeal.
Yeah, David, thank you for mentioning my grandson. Unfortunately, my grandson met in a serious accident on Monday past, and David, you would have known that I would have called you and say, hey, David, I don't think I could make the show because of the situations we're dealing with with respect to him. His name is Tavares. Right now he's at Duran Hospital and preparing for surgery tomorrow, God's willing. And I just want to thank the staff, the persons at Duran Hospital. Oftentimes I've heard and I'm sure many of us have heard conversation talking about Duran and even Princess Margaret, and not in the most favorable of terms, and how these places you don't want to be caught there. But I want to say when we bash these institutions, we are bashing actually people. The institutions are made up of people, and so having this first-hand unfortunate situation and experience, I want to thank the doctors that I came in contact with so far, and the nurses who've been quite supportive, and I appeal to persons who know how to pray, to pray for my family and my grandson. His name is Tavares, like I said. So, yesterday and coming out of this accident, I felt very pressed down, and I felt that I couldn't come on the show. But I called David and I told him after praying, I felt encouraged, and really I'm moving not in my strength, but I'm moving in the strength of God, and I'm thankful to God for sparing his life, and we're just praying for a successful operation. So David, thank you for allowing me to say to the public, this is a personal situation we're going through, and I know a lot of families are at this time challenged with many different challenge. And so in my prayer, I pray for not only for myself, not only for my grandson. I've been praying for our community, and I've seen a lot of hurt up close, and I pray for our country as well. So thank you, David, for allowing me to express my emotions on that.
And for those of you who would like to donate blood, you can do so at the Rand Memorial Hospital to assist young Tavares Evans Jr. That's the least we can do as he prepares for surgery. Many of you know the Williams family, you know the Duhini family. Danny wide range. We didn't get to talk about his time at the power company. That's another day and another show. We wanted to talk about Hawksbill. Tomorrow, please join me. We're going to be talking about the history of the labor movement in Grand Bahama. Joining me is going to be one of St. Salvadorian's finest sons, in the person of Mr. Leo Augustus Douglas. I'm going to take the first segment to talk with Mrs. Thompson, Agatha Thompson, the 20th anniversary of Ocean View Retirement Village and its relaunch. And we're going to be also talking about International Day for Older Persons. So we're going to take the first 15 minutes to talk to her, and then we're going to have the conversation with Mr. Leo Augustus Douglas as we talk about the labor movement in Grand Bahama. We're going to talk about his times with the late Neville Simmons and the late Huey Bodie and the late Dr. Thomas Bastian. Shows we're working on for you next week. There will be no show next week, Monday, as we celebrate National Heroes Day. We're working on the history of the Parliament. We want to talk to some former speakers of the Progressive Liberal Party and the Free National Movement. What is the purpose of the House of Assembly? Why do we pass laws? What do they mean when they say they adjourn, sine die? And so we want to make it an educational show. And then we're also going to be talking about the history of the 96-year journey of the Bahama Brass Band. We've invited Director David Beneby and Sean Gibson, the Vice President of Public Relations. We also want to talk to none other, the journey of the legendary Jay Mitchell. A wonderful story to tell. And we are also working on a few other stories for you for next week. And so, you tune into Direct Talk. In the final segment, we're going to be going to the phone. We're going to be talking to Miss Delcina Pratt. She owns Hawksbill. Hawksbill is all hers.
That's right.
She couldn't have this show unless she call in.
That's right.
And Calvin Parker is going to join us for the final segment. You tune into Direct Talk. I'm your host, David G. Good afternoon. Welcome back to Direct Talk. I'm your host, David G. Today's scripture, Reverend Arlington Hanna says, "Good morning. Today's encouragement. Then he spoke a parable unto them, that men always ought to pray and not to lose heart." Luke 18:1. And it says, "When you pray, God listens. When you listen, God talks. When you believe, God works." Have a great day and be safe. Thanks, Reverend Arlington Hanna. Joining us for the final segment, another Hawksbill boy.
Yes,
Came
sir.
from a place called West Side Village. Been at the Rand Memorial Hospital for some 44 years. Mr. Calvin Parker, good afternoon. Welcome to Direct Talk.
Good afternoon to you, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell me, he's a Hawksbill boy. You grew up in Hawksbill too?
Grew up in Hawksbill. As a matter of fact, I was sitting out front listening to Daniel Williams. And it's so interesting that his history parallels my history so much. Honestly,
I love it.
he gave the example at age 7. He said he left the Turks and Caicos, came down on a sloop. I remember hearing all of that. I left the Turks and Caicos at the age of 8.
Okay.
Fortunately for us, we came on a steam engine ship.
You left a little later.
Yes, it was a Italian vessel, I think it was.
Okay.
Very nice. They had the cafeteria and everything on board. Daniel said it took them 8 days to arrive in Nassau. For us, it was 3 days.
Okay.
From the Turks and Caicos when we arrived. We left there in 65,
Okay.
some months after the death of my father. Other relatives invited my mom because she had 5 small children. I was the oldest of the last 5. My mother had 10 living children. I happened to be the 6th of the 10 children.
What was your mother's name?
My mother was Hester Forbes,
Where was she from?
Nee Glinton of Salt Key,
Okay.
Turks and Caicos.
Okay.
She was known as Mama Forbes in the Anglican Church, where we attended there at the Good Shepherd.
Okay.
talking about the churches. Earlier on, you had on Reverend Kenneth Lewis, who spoke about the Methodist Church. Well, the St. Andrew's Methodist Church has an interesting history. St. Andrew's also shared with the Church of the Transfiguration Anglican congregation. The Church of the Transfiguration was attended by most of the Anglicans who lived there in Hawksbill or in the surrounding area. The congregation was headed by the then Father Eric Sam, who later became Canon Eric Sam. He and his wife, Thelma, were there, along with their oldest son at the time, Christopher.
Chris Sam.
Yes, and I think the Anthony came some years later, but Father Sam was the one in charge of the congregation there in Hawksbill. Some years later, I think after Bishop Michael Eldon came on board, after Good Shepherd was developed, we were all then invited to move to the Good Shepherd in Pinders Point, so that we could help the congregation there. As they were in their building phase. So the Anglicans out of Hawksbill moved to the Good Shepherd in Pinders Point, and where most of them continue to worship. Some, over the years moved out. So yes, Hawksbill, interesting. Grew up there. We moved in, as Daniel said, shortly after them. They went there in the December of 66. I was 10 years old in 67. We moved in January of 67.
What number?
110 Ackland's Place. 110 Ackland's Place. My sister still lives there, that famous corner, 110 Ackland's Place. The Stewarts,
when you say the Stewart, you mean
Jerry Stewart.
Jerry Stewart.
Jerry Stewart,
That's Jesse
yes.
them.
Oh, yes. Jesse and all of them. Howard Stewart. His family.
Rileys.
We had the Rileys. We had the Bowlegs, Solomon Bowleg and Mrs. Bowleg.
Richardson.
The Richardsons came somewhat later. As a matter of fact, we had Mr. Earl Walken. This gentleman who had worked
built all these roads.
Yes, sir.
Build of Freeport.
That's Mr. Earl.
Most
people would see him. The McAlpines were on the other corner. They came.
Frederick McAlpine.
Oh yeah, Frederick McAlpine. They came out of Hawksbill as well. As a matter of fact, they lived on the corner next to the Jervises. He also mentioned Sheffield Henfield, who also grew up in Hawksbill. On Ackland's Place, the corner that I grew up in, we also had the Gardeners. A very musical family. As a matter of fact, their mother was a music teacher. And while talking about music, one of your favorite interviewees over the years was a lady called Mistress Lillian
Bean.
Lillian
lived
Bean.
Very long. You're right there.
Yes, sir. Miss Lillian was also a music teacher. As a matter of fact, I attended piano lessons with Miss Lillian. I'm one of those who didn't complete it, so that's why when my children came along, I made sure they went, and they all had to complete their music lessons. But yes, Miss Lillian lived in Hawksbill as well. We had the Albreys, Dwayne Albry, Neil Albry, Marvin Albry, who's now married to Patra, who used to be Major. They lived in Hawksbill at one point as well. The Majors,
Wayne Smith tells me they live in Hawksbill
Wayne
as well.
Smith and his sister Janice and the other brothers, they all lived in Hawksbill as well. Not too far from the St. Andrew's Methodist Church, by the way.
Don't forget the first record store in Freeport, John
You
Lavardi.
don't want to talk into this microphone. You want you come on this show fly from now, so to talk low. Push your voice in this
That's
mic.
right, John Lavardi.
John.
John Lavardi lived in Hawksbill. That's right.
That's right.
The house is still there. Some other persons living in it now.
Kenny Basin says Topi Basin lived in Hawksbill.
Yes, he did. He sure did.
Clivor Robinson family.
Yes.
And Stanley Williams.
Yes.
Stanley Williams, the Williams.
Dr. Williams.
Dr. Williams. They all grew up in Hawksbill. All of them lived there.
And I got a text here, the Romans lived in Hawksbill as well.
The Romans lived in Hawksbill. I knew them very well. As I said, with St. Andrew's, the Methodist Church, the Anglicans who attended Transfiguration, we would have the early Mass, which would start, I think, about 7 a.m. or 8 a.m., And by time Mass was over, then the Methodists would come in for their 10 or 11 o'clock
So they had
session.
2 worships at the
Yes,
church.
yes.
Okay.
Two congregations.
You all shared the same church.
Yes, we did.
That's very
and that is
historic,
where I started my my singing, you might say, career. Learned to sing because we had these young, very attractive teachers who came in. At that point was Miss Andrea Thomas, who later became Gottlieb. Andrea, Mrs. Andrea Gottlieb now.
Yeah.
She along with a Miss I'm trying to remember the teacher. Miss Fisher.
Okay.
They came. I think they were all teachers at St. Paul's.
Okay.
And they were members of the St. Andrews. They would come down there and work with the young people, put on Christmas plays. Oh, I mean.
And I remember
awesome.
when Louise Sanders and Kermit
Yes,
and
the Sanderses,
Kelly and
yes.
Kay and Keith.
Yes,
and
they all moved into
Bishop.
Hawksbill.
They all moved to Hawksbill from out of Sea Grape.
That's right.
Yeah, I cried.
Yeah.
I had a crush on Kelly, and it was easy for me to ride my bicycle to Sea Grape. I couldn't find Hawksbill.
You and everybody else.
Yeah. Who are some of the other families? I am told that the mechanic would have been a Leonard Roma, would have been the mechanic in True Hawksbill.
Yes, Mr. Leonard Roma moved. They lived on not too far again from St. Andrews. We call that the end of Hawksbill. They lived in that area. Mr. Leonard Roma.
Eleuthera Drive.
Yes, Eleuthera Drive.
What were the name of the streets in Hawksbill?
Now you've done it.
I know one is the Nagua Place.
You got it now. Go ahead, Harold.
Let me help him out.
Yes,
You have Eleuthera Drive. All right. You had Abaco Drive, which is the main street in Hawksbill.
Absolutely.
You had You have Acklands, Inagua, Rumkey, and Bimini Place.
That's it. Yeah, there you go. Also in Hawksbill.
Now we gotta send a shout out to Delcina. She can call. The number to call Delcina is 352-3984 or 352-3985. We want to get you on the show. When you speak to the producer, just let him know who you are. That you are the voice of Hawksbill. Who else?
Talking about the Pratts, also we had Maria Pratt, Marva Pratt, Sandra Pratt, their oldest brother Eugene Pratt.
Yes.
Their mother, Mistress.
Just went to be with the Lord.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Miss Ethel.
Yes.
Miss Pratt was employed with Daniel mentioned Elamar.
Okay.
That's where Elamar started, at the shopping center there in Hawksbill.
Okay.
And Miss Pratt had worked there in the early years, even when they moved into Freeport, and then she eventually retired. So the Pratt family, they lived. What's that? That's Rumkey?
No,
that's the first one.
Rumkey.
That's Rumkey.
Okay. I want to share. I want to share my
ahead.
story about Mrs. Pratt at Elamar. Back then everyone had a bicycle. All right.
That was the order of the day.
Yeah, that was a bicycle. You had your Playboy, and then you elevated to a 10-speed
Whatever
bike.
you did to it.
Of course, I didn't have a 10-speed bike, but what I did was I saved my lunch money the whole year round until I was able to save enough money to purchase a bike. And Christmas Eve, I think the bike was for $110 at the time.
Okay.
And, I went Christmas Eve about 7:30, just before the store closed. I went to Elamar. Miss Pratt was, the cashier there. And so I gave her a bunch of quarters and dollar bills, that totaled up to $101.
For the bicycle.
The bicycle cost $110, so I was $9 short. All right. So Mrs. Pratt, after she was finished counting and everything, she said, "You know what? I'm going to put in the $9 for you, and you can take the bike." I rode off with that bike, and I was just elated.
You bought it? The store was in Hawksbill?
The store was in Hawksbill.
Okay.
It was a brand new 10-speed bike. I never forgot her for that.
Yeah, Miss Pratt was that type of person, very kind-hearted. You go to the drugstore, always very pleasant. We all called it the drugstore. We didn't say Elamar. We just say we're going to the drugstore.
The drugstore.
Coming around Christmas time, you had your little your guns. You would go there to buy your firecrackers, to put inside the gun, that sort of thing. You save up a few dollars to buy a certain toy. You can always go there and count on Miss Pratt being there to assist. You were trying to, obtain that little toy you wanted. Very nice family. Very nice.
Hawksbill seemed to have been a very close-knit community.
It was. It really was at that time, growing up in the early days. As Daniel also mentioned when he was here, that we had, in the early days, the Canadians, a lot of
people of color
expats were also living in Hawksbill. I don't know, there was a Miss Sweeting who worked in Royal Bank for many years. Her son name just slipped me. He also attended Hawksbill.
Was that Ron?
No, it wasn't Ron. Well, anyway, Miss Sweeting was a very nice lady. I dealt with her. I think one of my first banking transactions, I had to deal with Miss Sweeting at Royal Bank. Get a loan, as Harold mentioned. The homes in Hawksbill were considered a price today, only cost a couple of dollars. Yeah. But back then, it was costly, especially if you were a single mother, as my mother was.
It could fit our budget.
Yes. And
5 children.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So she had to, work, as she was a person who worked in other people's home to cook for them and clean for them, that sort of thing. There was a time when I learned that she was behind on the mortgage. And it wasn't years later and I came to realize what the mortgage was, and I was like surprised, I said, but at that time, that was a lot for her. Even trying to pay for a mortgage of, $100 and something per month.
$150 a month.
So what I did, there was a balance. I went, when I started my employment there at the Rand Memorial Hospital, got a loan and paid it off.
You're a good son.
Yes,
I see why Colin marry you.
Oh, praise the Lord.
Let's go to the phone line. I think Delcine is on the phone. Good afternoon, Delcine. Welcome to Direct Talk.
I'm not sure, Delcine.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Are you there, Delcine?
Oh, you're not talking to
Jacqueline Sub says, hi, I'm enjoying your show, but the volume is too low, Harold.
Okay.
Christine Lightboy in Davos says, good morning, David G. and your guests. Remember my uncle Lee Penn was some of the first families that lived in Hawksbill.
Now, let me tell you about Mr. Penn. If you enter Hawksbill now, the very first house on the left as you enter Hawksbill, that's where Mr. Lee Penn lived. His relatives are still living in that house.
Okay.
It's the very first house on the left, and the very first house on the right as you enter Hawksbill, that is where the office was.
You guys go to the pay?
Yes.
Administrative
that house was used, yes, as the office.
The Morrises, she said, lived there as well?
Yes, they lived in Hawksbill as well.
Ivan Samuel Johnson is still living in Hawksbill.
Yes.
He was the taxi driver.
Yes. Know him
he
very
also
well.
had a musical band that played at funerals, etc.
Absolutely.
He's
from the Methodist Church. He's still alive. Still alive. He lived right through the corner with the Albies, Mr. Bernard Arana, who was a senior man with the cinema. They lived right through that same corner. Dirk Gorea also lived right through that corner.
Julie Sands says, Kelvin and Harold love hearing about Hawksbill.
Oh,
Miss
Julie.
Pratt
Hello,
was
Julie.
lovely. So are her children. Kurt Cooper says, don't forget Reverend Mackey, who lived in Hawksbill and was the first pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Kurt Cooper from ZNS. Now, let me tell you about Mr. Mackey. I'm happy, Kirk. Thank you so much. Pastor Mackey was a Baptist minister sent from, I think, Transfiguration Baptist Church and to start a Baptist church there in Hawksbill. He lived in the house where the Richardsons now live.
Oh, okay.
All right. Mr. Mackey first lived there.
That's right.
And in the front of Mr. Mackey, where the Maiders now live, was the Daniels, a Jamaican family. They also moved from Westside Village. Mr. Daniels was a musician, played the congos and other things, because they used to play in the hotel, the bands. Then they eventually left and moved into Canada, where they've been ever since. But Mr. Mackey, he established the Emmanuel Baptist Church in Hawksbill. He was very active with going around and recruiting the youngsters to come out to the various activities. And he had what they call RAs, Royal Ambassadors, very similar to the Boy Scouts.
Okay.
There was a year, I can't remember the exact year, but Daniel, a little older than I am, he might remember, when Mr. Mackey took a group of us to Ragged Island. That was the vacation I'll never forget.
Amen.
A vacation of a lifetime. That was my first trip outside of Grand Bahama. We went, I think, had to be in the late 60s, but he took us, probably about 8 or more of us, or 6, into Ragged Island, where we spent a week.
Okay.
He went there for vacation Bible school.
Okay.
And every day after vacation Bible school, we had in the water. It was lovely. Well, we had to, we flew into Nassau, and then we took the mail boat from Nassau to Ragged Island. Yeah.
Harold, as we wrap up, closing comments.
Well, I got 2 minutes. I'm sorry,
because you were let me salute you too for being such an excellent local government representative.
Yeah. Well, let me just say, obviously we're very proud the fact that we came from Hawksbill. Hawksbill being one of the model community on Grand Bahama. So many history about persons who would have contributed to Life Society, to the development of Grand Bahama. It's just something that we can pretty much boast about. I wanted to talk to you about, but I know we don't have the time, about the athletes that came from Hawksbill.
We can do it. We come up with it in the second segment.
Okay.
Because I shot you an hour of talking to Danny.
We had so many athletes that came from Hawksbill, and so
and we got to talk about the schools.
If the government can look at the kind of community that Hawksbill once was and try to duplicate this throughout the country, I think it will go well for the development of the country.
Amen. Mr. Parker, closing comments.
As I look back, I have to reflect on Hawksbill School. Hawksbill School at the time was supposed to be the prototype of what a government school was supposed to look like. Hawksbill School had a gymnastic program. Hawksbill School had a woodwork program. Hawksbill School had a sewing program, a catering program, had science labs. I'm not talking about the high school. I'm talking about the primary, the first section. When the high school came on, just about everything was there in place. But we're only praying that moving forward, we'll be able to continue to develop this sort of idea around our schools so that we can get the full potential from our students, because they are definitely there. The quality of education is available, but we just need to put the infrastructure in place.
Well, thank you all.
It's certainly been a
you're
pleasure.
A proud Hawkins.
Pleasure.
And it's good because it took the village to raise the child.
Yes.
Thank you very much for accepting the invitation. We got to continue this conversation.
We'd have to.
It is quite evident there's more to talk about of that community called Hawksbill. Thanks to my producers, Philip Marsh, Ray Delver, the director, to Avery Forbes on radio, to Master Control out of the capital city of Nassau. I want to say a special hello to the sales team, Kayla Nixon, supervisor, Nikita Wilmore, Eleanor McCoy, Aniska Bannister, Shanette Ferguson, and in the Northern Service, Sherry Sanders and Gail Boone. And to my lady who's coming to Freeport, and Thea Munnings, my good administrative assistant, and to none other than Melissa Knowles, my boss, Dion Morris. See you tomorrow. God spares life as you have a beautiful afternoon.
The views expressed on this show, interview, or program are not necessarily the views expressed
by the ZNS Radio Network
and by extension the Broadcasting Corporation of
the Bahamas.